Hey y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood therapist. Look, I'm gonna do a Sinners Sunday part 2 tomorrow. I just want to let y'all know that. But also, speaking of sinners, can we talk real quick about the historical connection between African Americans and Irish Americans? Let's get into it. So listen, I'm gonna try to make this fast. The history of the connection between these particular two people groups is one that is very nuanced, okay? You have two people groups that all the way back in colonial times were oppressed, right? The oppression looked different though. This is why you see so many nowadays when these discussions happen. You will see a lot of African American folks get very upset when Irish folks try to say that they too were oppressed just like our ancestors. It's slightly different, okay? Now, colonization and all that was horrible. People had homes taken, land taken. They were put in positions of servitude, yes, but there will always be a stark difference between chattel slavery, which the Irish people did not experience, and indentured servitude. Okay, both groups come from ancestors who were colonized. Okay, come from places that were colonized. Both groups had people that were brought here to the Americas and forced into work. But there is still a difference between chattel slavery and being treated as property and indentured servitude and still being seen as human, fully human. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. There is so much to talk about with this particular subject matter, but I want us to realize that had the Irish Americans, because in the beginning we had a really strong bond and connection. Back then, Irish people and African enslaved folks came together a lot more, but then that stopped. And what stopped it was a lot of different things, but I really want to focus on once these slaves were freed, once the enslaved became free, then it went from we have this common bond because you cannot compete with me. I'm still a step ahead of you, a little bit, so you can't compete with me, to now you are my competition. Now I am in competition with you for very low paying jobs, for housing, for all these different things. And once that happened, that is when you see Irish people start to align with whiteness versus their culture. Let's be clear, white is not a culture, white is a creation. So when Irish folks figure out if we align more with our whiteness, we go up one more step. This is what they begin to do, a lot of them. So you then have less Irish people aligning with the African folks, the African American folks, and you have more of them aligning with whiteness and white supremacy and privilege and all that, right? Because that is getting them ahead in a sense. But there were still allyships, okay, across the board. There were still allyships. Frederick Douglass and Daniel O'Connell is one of the quintessential ones in history. They were allied in fighting against white supremacy, right? But I also want us to understand how much greatness came out of the bond of these two groups. For example, I think I knew this, but I became hyper aware of it when they did the dance sequence, Remick in Sinners, when he was outside doing the Irish dance sequence, tap dancing. I took tap from the time I was 3 until I was like 17. Tap dancing. That is a combination of West African dances and Irish dances. Now, tap comes out of the jazz era, but the combination of the dances, the taps being like the percussion of the drum, the jigging like they do in Irish river dance and folk dances, they combine that to get tap dancing. This is why that sequence resonates so much for us. That's why. This is why we hear it and we're like, oh no, we can get with this. So that was something interesting to me that tap dancing is a combination of these two cultural groups. But what's also interesting is Remick became the thing he hated. I need people to understand that because a lot of us, Remick is very nuanced, which I love a nuanced villain where you can't hate him, but you can't really love him. He became the thing he hated. You see how he used whiteness to connect with the clan member and Joan, his wife. He used whiteness. But then he used that Irish background to connect with the African American folks, right? But ultimately, he did exactly what colonizers did to him, which was colonize other cultures. Because when he took them in, when he bit them and they became one with him, they lost their culture and assimilated into Irish culture, really. So the overall lesson here for me is whiteness doesn't save. In fact, it destroys. And that's whiteness. A lot of white people get upset when we say that because they think we're saying white people. No, we're saying whiteness because whiteness has no culture. The culture is you are Scottish, you are Polish, you are Irish, you are French, you are this, you are that. But whiteness is a construct. Whiteness was created. Whiteness destroys. When you try to assimilate to whiteness, you don't save yourself, you lose yourself. So, what y'all think? Anyway, y'all have a beautiful, wonderful rest of the day, and I will holler at y'all later.